Hi everyone, it's Andy from Hobby Headquarters. Well, I was just about to start a new series of videos for you guys and on weathering and really beating up some type of armor kits. We're going to do different ones. The very first one I wanted to do was on Russian armor. So I started going through my display case behind me there, trying to find a piece of Russian armor that I had built up, and realized that I have nothing built up in there that I could actually go and weather for you guys. So went over to my rack and started looking around for something really cool to build. And then I had realized I had never built the JS2 from Tamiya. And it's a relatively new kit. I did build the JS152, which shares the lower hull of this kit, but never one as the JS2. I know some of you guys call it the IS2. The box art says JS2, so that's what I'm calling it for right now on that. So whatever it's called is fine. But what I thought I would do is I would build up the very first part of the video, first half of the video, that we would do the actual build of this kit. And then at the end, we will do a whole thing on really weathering and beating it up. So, you know, make it really cool looking, like it's been out in the weather for a long, long period of time. Now, I know with weathering, it's subjective. And when you talk to guys that have been in the military, vehicles don't always weather the way we kind of make them up in modeling. Sometimes you have to have a little bit of artistic license, like putting rust on tracks. A vehicle that is moving is never going to have rust on the tracks because the track is going to move and the rust is going to wear off on it. But for this purposes right here, sometimes you have to have, like I said, a little bit of artistic license with the vehicle. Sometimes it looks just really cool. It might not be plausible or realistic, and I look at books and magazines all the time, and you go, well, that probably could never really happen that way, but it looks good. So that's what we're going to kind of do. We're not going to make it look like it's been out in a field for 100 years, but we're going to make it look like it's been through combat. So I think we'll have a lot of fun, and that's sometimes the best part of modeling, is doing what you want to do. And if you're happy making it look that way, or if you're happy as making looking showroom fresh, like it just came off the assembly line, that's great. Whatever makes you happy is how you want to do it. But for this example, we're going to beat it up a little bit. So let's get started on it. Okay, the first thing I thought I would do is just talk a little bit about the lower suspension, or basically the lower half of this vehicle. And the wheels obviously go together super simple. There's an A and B wheel that you just glue the two sides together. But the thing that I like about these wheels are that on the outside you have to install a poly cap for each one of them, and then you install a cap over the entire thing. And having a poly cap on makes it very, very nice, especially later on when you go into painting, that if you want to get in there and do any detail painting, I always prefer wheels to have poly caps in it, and I love when they do something like that. And the reason I bring that up is because inside this kit there are two types of track inside. First of all, Tamiya has gone ahead and given you the typical rubber bands, we'll call them. Now these are made out of the new type of soft plastic, so they use regular modeling glue to glue them together if you're not familiar with this kit. But we're not going to use those in this one because I actually like this type much better. And these are the individual link and link tracks. So you've got long links of tracks as well as the individual tracks right here, plus a nice little handy guide to get that nice little sag on the top of the JS2s. Now, one reason that I like about these is A, they always have a little bit more detail, because when they're molding them in this position, they're just crisper and have a little bit more depth to them. But the other thing that I really like about this type of track is that because we're going to do a video about weathering and beating them up quite a bit, this type of plastic, because it's the same plastic as the kit's made out of, holds up a lot better to it. Sometimes when you put a lot of chemicals on the rubber bands, they can sometimes soften it and things like that. This is regular polystyrene plastic. You can do whatever you want to it and you're not going to have any problems with it. So we're going to go ahead and definitely put these on. Now what I'll show you real fast as well is here's our lower bathtub style tub. And we have all of our lower suspension pieces that we've just cut off, so we still have to do a little bit of sanding on all of those. And we're just going to go down the line and glue in all of the suspension piece that all have a locking peg inside of them, so you get it just in the right position. And then we'll also glue up all of the wheels. We've got to do a little bit of sanding, but that shouldn't be very long at all. So what I'll do now is I'm going to get all of this, the wheels, the suspension, all those parts all sanded up, ready to go, and we'll glue them into place. And then I will come back and show you guys the next step. Okay, we've just finished up putting in all the suspension arms, all of the other little components that make up the side, as well as the return rollers. And now we are just sliding into place all of the road wheels. And remember, they have poly caps, so they just pop right on. And that'll make it much, much easier for painting and things down the road later. We've also got all those pieces all sanded up now as well. So now what we're going to do is we're going to start working on the tracks, because we can build that as assembly. Now what happens is, and I'll show it to you on this piece of length track, you'll notice on this Russian armor that there is a one with a guide horn, then one without a guide horn, and then, you know, back and forth. Now we have this guide to make the sag for the top, and Tamiya suggests you put it inside there and then glue them together. What I'm going to recommend you do is, and I've just done this just minutes before just to show you guys, these are all the individual links that I've glued together for probably about maybe 4 or 5 minutes ago. So you can see they're still very, very soft. What we're going to do, I think it's just going to be a lot easier to do that and then push it into this mold and let it set up that way. That way we're not getting glue and you're not accidentally gluing the tracks to this support. So that can be a little difficult, and you don't want to get anything, you know, stuck and then having to mess it up. So with this way, just take them on a flat surface, kind of just push them all together like we would normally do. I want to try to keep my hand out of the way for you guys. They're so tiny. Let's zoom in a little bit. And what we're doing is we're just going to slide them together just in the proper pattern. And I'm just showing you this as a demonstration. And then we're just going to put a little touch of glue on both of the cracks. And that'll just wick right down all the sides right there. Let that set up for a few minutes, and then we're ready to put them up. Now, you might also notice too that there are 2 little injection pin marks on each one of the tracks. I'm going to clean those up actually after we get all of the pieces dried and set up. It's just a slight sag, so it shouldn't interrupt too much the sanding stick going around on it. And then of course the long piece, this is super easy to go down the line because you just have one long sanding stick. You can just start taking out all of those little injection pin marks on it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to work on these for a little while. Not much more to show you on this other than once we get this set up here. I thought I actually glued it after all that thing about talking about it. Now I know I've got to let this dry, but you can see how they're just going to fit right into place here, right on all the bumps. So I'm going to take the next, probably a half an hour or so, work on one set of tracks, get it all set up, show you guys what they look like. And because of the way that this kit goes together, we can actually leave the whole lower hull separate, just like we did on the JS152. So installing the tracks, painting them will actually be much, much easier. We can weather and beat them up, get it all dirty inside here, do all that stuff, and then just drop the top right on top of it. So I'm going to go ahead and get those tracks on right now. We'll come back and show you what they look like. What I'll do now is show you how the actual tracks on the bottom go up. This is the center length piece that we were sanding a minute ago. We've attached all the individuals onto the front. So now all we have to do is just get it lined up on it, and then before the glue dries, we just want to wrap these tracks around, and then finally we'll be able to drop this sag piece right into the middle here and glue those into place there. And you can see as we get it all pulled tight, we'll have all of our tracks wrapped around it. Here we go. Here is the one side with the tracks in place with a nice little sag going on there. One thing I should also point out too, I kept mentioning the fact with the poly caps and how much useful it's going to be, and then I go ahead and glue them all into place. And what I should point out to that is it's very, very useful. We could have made these tracks separate right here and we could take them all off and paint them, but because I'm going to be weathering and really beating them all up, I just glued them into place to make it simple, so I'm not too worried, and I know I can get in there tight with the airbrush and still do all the tracks and the wheels separately. But if you're just starting out, if you don't do the rubber bands are obviously the easiest, but they don't have the nice sag that these are going to have. But what you can still do is just not glue the last 2 pieces together and never put any glue around. Let the tracks set up as they are. You can separate it and pull the whole thing off if you're worried about, you know, painting them separately. And I'm sorry, I should have pointed out a little bit more clearly earlier, but I was thinking about it and I go, I should tell you guys about that. So if you're going to do it this way, and I'll try to show in a little bit more depth later on when we get into painting, how that we can, we're obviously going to paint the entire thing NATO black, get all that nice and shadowed and done in there, and then we'll get the tracks all painted up, and then we'll go back with our airbrush on a real fine setting and just get in there tight and paint all the wheels up. So we'll show you that later on, but I'm going to go ahead and get the other side of the track built up right now. Okay, now we're going to start on the upper part of the hull. And also, just wanted to point out, I was looking at some of the video I just filmed a second ago, and we kind of had to adjust the sag a little bit in our tracks. We had a little bit too much sag on one side, but gone ahead and tried to get it as even as possible on it. Now it comes time to actually start gluing the upper hull together, and the upper hull is actually molded in 2 halves, and it's got some locator pins that get it to line up really straight and easy. Now you've also noticed too, I've gone ahead and I've glued the fenders on already, as well as on the inside here we've put part of the louvers in for the exhaust, or actually the intakes, excuse me, the intakes on that. And on top of those intakes, we are actually, they include inside photo etch parts, so we'll be able to put those on as well. And also included in the kit are these pieces of plastic right here that'll basically cover up the inside of the sponson. So once you put those inside, you won't get any light bleed through that if you open up your turret, have a guy in there, you won't be able to see through down into the tracks, which is not very realistic. And then also we have this other set of louvers that goes like this. This will slide right in around those, and it'll go in the other half of the side. And once you snap all of those into place, you get the nice set of louvers like it's supposed to be. So that quickly and easily, we've got most of the upper hull ready to go together. Then it's just a matter of, we'll put the rest of these on as well. But then we can start working on to the turret as well. And it too is a pretty easy, straightforward piece. You got an upper and lower piece, nice casting, nice cut marks on it. And then we've got the front of the mantlet here. That'll get glued into place. And you can see we've got the shape of our turret. We have to put obviously the hatches and all those other pieces on there. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to finish up putting this together, getting it all squared up. We will glue into place using our CA glue to put all of the photo etch parts on into place. We'll get it all squared up, glued into place, and we'll come back and show you how it mates to the top of the, or excuse me, to the lower part of the hull. We now have the majority of parts glued into place here and done most of the sanding that we need to do on it. We will check later on if there's any flaws after we put our black shadow coat on. That'll tell us if we have any flaws anywhere. And keep in mind too, there is a seam that goes down the middle of these tanks. It's actually a weld seam, so you don't want to sand that seam out on the top there. Now that we have most of it, and oh, one thing I should point out too is we haven't attached any of the tools, and that is because we're going to paint and put those on separately later. Now it's just a matter of, you can see it just, there's 2 hinges back here on the real vehicle, and those pieces just slide together there, and that's how the top and bottom mate together. Now we are not going to go ahead and glue that on yet, because remember I talked about I want to be able to get in here and really weather up the tracks, so we're going to leave that just how it is. I've also started gluing together and sanding out the seam. It is a 2-part barrel, so there is a seam down the middle of here, and we've been working on sanding that. We also have to work a little bit on sanding out the seam in here, but wanted to give you a general idea what the vehicle looks like. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to finish working up on the barrel, seams, all that stuff. We're also going to attach the cupola as well as any of the other accessories on top of the vehicle and the little grab handles that go all the way around there. And that is the majority of the build. It's just quick and easy like that. It took a grand total of about maybe about 7-8 hours total to get to this point. So it's definitely a weekend build. So I'm going to go ahead and finish up all of those parts. We'll come back and we'll put our shadow coat on and start doing our painting and weathering. Okay, we have 2 coats actually of NATO black on here, and the reason I say 2 coats is the very first coat we put on, I went back and found a few little flaws that we needed to take care of that the shadow coat really makes pop out. So we took care of those, sanded them down, got them all nice and smooth, and then put a second coat on there. And now that we have that, we wanna make the paint look a little faded on this, since we are gonna beat it up a little bit more than normal. So we are gonna do our white highlight coat now. And the white highlight coat is gonna fill in little areas, leaving the black around all the edges and all the cracks. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna do that right now. Okay, here's what the white highlight coat looks like now. I did slightly thin the white paint a little bit more than we normally would, and that is just because white paint from Tamiya sometimes comes on a little bit speckly if you don't thin it down a little bit more, and you can get some little highlight spots here and there where it looks like it's kind of a little bit wetter than others, but it won't matter because it's going to get completely covered over by the next coat. And speaking of paint, I am going to use Tamiya's XF58 olive green. This is going to be our base coat, and like I was saying earlier, we're going to go a light mist coat and kind of build up gradually. We don't want it to you know, saturate all the black and white. We want to have the two tones really show up. Okay, so we've put the coat of green on, and hopefully you can see that we have nice fading of the paint all around the vehicle. I'm going to go over it right now with some Tamiya dull coat to seal in this paint job, and then we will go over it one more time just with the olive green, just to make sure we've gotten a nice even coverage on it so that there's no white spots that stick out, which I see like a little one right inside of there. So we'll go ahead and put the dull coat on and then come back and put one more coat on it and show you what it looks like. And we've just went ahead and shot a coat of TS80, Tamiya's flat clear. There it is right there. And so now you can get a general idea. Let's turn the little turntable on and you can see all of the tonal variations on the kit. And don't forget, this is going to get weathered heavily because that's the whole purpose of this video here. But you'll still will be able to see some of those tone variations. Okay, now we're going to start the process of weathering up the lower part of the tank, and we're going to start off with the suspension and the tracks, and we're going to turn this into this, all beat up and worn on it, and I'll show you how to do that right now. Okay, we're going to use quite a few different washes and pigments to get that effect. We're going to use a little light rust wash, a streaking rust effect, a streaking grime for Africa Core, a track wash and regular streaking grime, and then the two types of pigment we're going to use are the light sienna as well as the desert dust, and a little lighter on the desert dust because it's a little bit brighter than the other one, but that is how we're going to get all of these little, hopefully you can see in them, the little highlight spots inside there. Okay, we're going to start off with our track wash, and we're going to apply a fairly liberal coat. And I'm going to show you on the top of the tracks because that's the easiest place to see all of this. And we're going to kind of use a blotting technique to kind of mix up all of our colors. And the next one we want to use is a little bit of our streaking grime. It's a little bit more of a brown color. And it doesn't matter if it gets any on the side because we can blot more of it off. We're going to put some other stuff down there. And finally, we're going to take a little bit of the gray color, which is like the for the Africa Core. And you kind of want to blend it. Not every portion of the track is going to get that, but it's going to lay down a nice base. And this is the type of thing that it's going to look one way while it's wet, but as it dries, it'll start to blend and change colors on it. Okay, now before that dries, we want to take a little bit of the light sienna pigment, and we're going to start blotting that in too. And once again, go on fairly heavy if you want. I use my left hand so I don't block the camera as much. And don't worry about putting it on heavy. We can always take off any excess that is too thick. And then what you can do is occasionally take a little bit of the desert dust and blot it into it too. And I know it disappears right into that stuff, but I promise you, once it dries, it will pop back out again too. So we want to just blend a little bit of that here and there and there. And well, I'm not going to obviously, it takes a good half an hour to an hour to get the other, and if you get dripping on that, you can just blot it right in. Now I showed you all of that stuff on the top of the tracks, how it was going on, but we also want to duplicate all of those exact same techniques up inside the wheel wells, on the wheels themselves. But the thing we're going to start to do a little bit different around here now is we're going to take a little bit of the rust colors that we were talking about, and not going to go super heavy, but we do want to put a few little areas of this lighter red rust around some of these things that give it the effect that the vehicle has had a little wear and tear on it. And we're going to, of course, blend that in with some more streaking rust and some streaking grime, just so there's never any real harsh places that are going to just be super crazy with one type of color. We want to make it look like it's been blended. And this is going to be the type of vehicle that's, you know, been seeing some combat, some city combat, and that's what some of the lighter dust color looks like, rubble that's accumulated on the vehicle. Now, I know that rust might look a little strong right now, but like I said, once again, it does dry a lot lighter and will blend in. And we also can keep going back and forth, blending and blending and blending. And my best thing to tell you guys is that just to keep taking the thinner and just keep going around and blotting and thinning and just getting it to make a nice effect on it. And then, of course, that effect is completely up to you, how you want it to be. So I'm going to keep working on this, and we'll put a little bit more rust. You can see how that's starting to fade into it right there, and it's just leaving a little bit of rust on it. Is we want to highlight some of the track pieces with a little, because this is going to be fighting in a city type terrain. Just using a number 2 pencil, just highlighting the very tops of the track. And this is going to take a little bit of time, and I'm mainly working on the edge right here because that's the part you're going to see the most. And just going back and forth over it, and that little bit of doing that really makes some of those little things really pop out. And we'll also go a little bit around, hopefully you can see in there too, right around the edges of the tire, of the wheels I should say, and then actually even on, because these are steel wheels, even on the actual edge of it as well, all the way around. So we'll work on that for a little while, and then we'll move on to the next step. Okay, you can see how as the pigments and the washes, all that start to dry, we really start to get a really, I think, a really nice, really worn effect on this vehicle. And this makes a huge mess. I'm not going to deny it. This stuff gets everywhere, so it's all over this mat I have here, but not to worry. We can always clean it off with a little enamel thinner. The only other thing that I've done on this side that I haven't done on the other side yet is you might see all the little specks and speckles inside there, and we achieve that by taking like a stiff paintbrush or toothbrush will work, and dipping it either in like the streaking rust effect or the streaking grime, something really dark, and you want to just basically flick all of that on there, going over all the different pieces, and it just puts real subtle little flecks everywhere that just make it look like it's got grime and grease all over the place that are really starting to build up. So this is the side I originally showed you, and you can see it's pretty much completely dry. This is the other side that I started showing you guys, and we still have to do some more work on it, and you can still see parts of it are still drying, but it's just that easy within 35 minutes, 45 minutes sometimes, to do each side of this here. But it's so much fun because it's the artistic part of doing this. And do it slowly and just let it dry a little bit and see how you like it, because I know how these colors all interact because I've used these multiple times. But you'll really be surprised how it looks wet compared to dry is just night and day difference. Okay, now I'm taking a foam sponge and just putting some marks on it that are kind of chips, kind of like rubs. And what we've done with this is we've taken the base coat XF58 and mixed it with XF57 buff 50/50, just to take the same color but lighten it down and get some of these little chips on things. And we're not going to go very heavy on it, just every once in a while we want to have a few of them on here to look like rubs. And I'll show you what we're going to do once that gets in place. We're going to take our regular chipping color and go over it, and you can see it'll be kind of like little areas that didn't go all the way through the paint but still rub the paint up quite a bit. So I'm going to go over the vehicle right now just lightly. We're going to put a few of those little marks here and there, some of the grab handles, things like that on it. Now we want to take a mixture of red brown and NATO black and just go over those same spots with this lightly with the foam brush, or just a hunk of foam actually, and kind of blend those together, kind of make some bigger scratches and chips. And you can go in other areas too, like down the side here where the white lettering is some of that's been chipped off. And just kind of blend in all together, because we want to get a nice chipped up undersurface first before we start doing the rest of our weathering. And finally, lightly, we're going to go over it just with a little bit of NATO black, just on its own. And I'm talking real lightly. We've blotted most of the paint out on a paper towel before we've done that, but just enough to leave some real superficial scratches that just barely show up. And we want to go over most of the vehicle again with all of that stuff. Take that lighter green that we mixed the buff and the olive green together, and we're going to highlight many of the rivets on the back here, and that's just going to make them pop out a little bit more. We're also going to do it over the rest of the vehicle, and we're going to use this same color to create some superficial scratches like we did with the chips around the edges, but these are just going to be longer, wider scratches. So now we're going to start putting our washes on, and now I'm just taking a paintbrush dipped in enamel thinner, and I want to put a little coat of enamel thinner on first. That just keeps the enamel washes flowing a little bit easier. And we're just going to concentrate on a small little area to show you guys, but I am going to do the entire vehicle like this. And we're going to use a little light rust wash as well as a little streaking grime on that, and we're going to kind of just go back and forth between the two colors, just putting small little amounts up on the top, and then we'll gradually just drag it down. So you can just put dots and let them flow and get in all the little nooks and crannies. And it's going on heavy right now. That's why we put the thinner down on it, because we're going to blend that all in a minute. So just start putting some little marks of this everywhere on the chips, all those little areas. And we can also add our streaking grime in between areas. And then this is how it all pulls together. Taking our clean brush and just start pulling down on it. And you can add a little bit more thinner to it. On these other areas you can blot, and that'll gradually blend all of those colors together. And we don't want to leave a ton of it left behind, but we do want to make it look like it's a worn vehicle. And every once in a while just kind of wash off the brush a little bit in thinner. And you can see that we're starting to have a nice stained up vehicle. And what I'll do is I'm going to do the whole vehicle, and then I'll show you what the thing looks like once it dries. And now that the enamel thinner is starting to dry, we're taking a little bit of our Vallejo pigment and blending it into some of the little nooks and crannies in here. And we're going to put it on kind of heavy because we're going to knock off quite a bit of the excess once it dries. And this will give it a nice dirty, as if it's been going through the towns, you know, building debris falling on it, things like that. And if you want, you can even use a little bit of the dust color. There's a little bit of highlights. Kind of blend that in. And I'll show you how that looks once it dries. I want to create a few little fuel stains now, and what we're going to use for that is fresh engine oil. And the reason we're going to use this one right here is because fresh engine oil dries glossy, so it's not going to be flattened out like some of the other ones. So we want to put a little bit on, and hopefully you can get it to run a little bit. Okay, and before any of that dries, we want to take a little bit of our light sienna, just lightly, and kind of tap it around any of the areas. And this is going to kind of give it a greasy, grimy area that'll still have a little bit of shine to it, but it'll look like it has some dirt that's been blended into it. So kind of just tap on that, kind of blend it together. And then we'll knock off any of the excess once this completely sets up and dries. But you can start to get the idea that it's kind of like a caked on, dirty type look. Now that most of the pigment and washes have dried, now comes the cleanup time. And what I mean by that is we're just taking a soft brush, no thinner, completely clean on it, and we're going to start taking off the excess because it is a little bit thick in some of these areas. And it's just a matter of going in there and just start taking off any of the excess that you don't want, making it as dirty or as clean as you want. And this is going to take a little bit of time, obviously. This is completely up to you on how you want to blend it into it. But just keep working away at it, and it'll gradually, you start to see some of the green paint come through. So I will work on that for a little while, and then we'll show you what the final results are on that. Now what we want to do is just take a little bit more of our streaking grime, slightly thin down a little bit more than normal, and we just want to go right around these little weld seams. And then right around some of these edges, right around in here too. And we want to make some definition in between some of this dirt. And once again, soft brush, and just lightly pull down. And we're going to go around all the seams on that, kind of just blend the last little bit together there. And we do want to put a few more little spots on this, and we're just using a real stiff paintbrush dipped with a little extra thin down streaking grime, and just lightly Well, here is our completed model, and I have to say I'm very happy with the weathering job and how it came out. Lots and lots of fun to put all the extra wear and tear on the vehicle. Now the kit itself, loved building it because it was a quick build. It took probably about a day and a half of actual construction time to get the entire vehicle together so we could start painting and weathering it. You'll also notice that we've gone ahead and attached the lens for the light, which is not a clear piece, but we just went ahead and painted it silver and then burnished it with a little bit of our burnishing metal powder to give it kind of a nice little reflection. Plus we also put the tools on, the extra tracks, things like that. Still haven't glued the top and bottom down together. That way if we ever want to take a look at the tracks or do anything else on there, or even eventually maybe bend up a fender and give it some battle damage or something like that. So the top is still not attached to the bottom, but it sticks together pretty well for our purposes. So you may also notice that there is no white stripe on the turret, and that white stripe actually represents the Battle of Berlin, and not every single tank JS2 that went into combat there had the stripe on it. but if you wanted to, you could pretend that it's the day before they were going to paint the stripe on it. In fact, I was looking through my parts box to see if I could find a little bucket that I could fill with some white paint, put up on the fender, and pretend that it was going to be painted the very next day. Anticipation for that. But the vehicle is all ready to go. We can definitely put it inside of a diorama now, knocked out building, all kinds of cool stuff we can do with it. But all in all, I had a great time building this, and sometimes it's really good to get out there and build something quick and just have some fun and not spend weeks at a time. So I want to thank you guys as always for watching, and please stay tuned because we have many more videos coming.